The truth is that investors going it alone don't tend to be very successful. So the average equity fund investor over the last 20 years, and we keep track of these statistics because it helps us understand some of the psychology in the marketplace, has returned about 4% relative to an 8% investment return for the market at large. It's even worse on the fixed income side. Most people, I think, just bury money in money market funds and don't even bother participating in the bond market. So what we know is that investors on their own don't typically hit the hurdle rates that are required for what they need. And so they hire us, and we have to develop a playbook to produce those rates of return. So let's get a little technical. Here we are getting inside our stock market playbook. First of all, philosophically, we want to own both value and growth. You'll hear some tell you that value's best. You'll hear some tell you that growth's best. The reality is they tend to oscillate as investment styles, so why not just own both? Additionally, there are moments of, I know this is confusing, it's supposed to be. I know there are moments where you'll see some areas of the market that exhibit persistent outperformance. So this is a periodic table of a lot of different investment classes and their returns. Here I'm highlighting the S&P 500, and you can see that the top performing boxes do show some trends. So before the investment crisis in 2008, you can see emerging markets did rather well. Coming out of 2008, you can see that REITs, high-yielding stocks, did rather well. And so you can latch on to some of those investment trends, some special situations, so we reserve the right to do that in the portfolio as well. So here is our portfolio framework, and it has been this way since, I autographed it in 2002. The growth component is 45%, the value component is 45%, equally weighted, and we reserve 10% of the portfolio for what we call special situations where we hope we can latch on to some of these more persistent and durable trends of outperformance. All right, so how about a couple of our biases? Those of you who are regulars know that we have a global bias. We really do believe that the best stock market is every stock market. And so just like growth and value, foreign stocks and domestic stocks tend to oscillate in terms of leadership performance over time, so why not own both? We also do hold a small cap bias. We prefer smaller companies over larger companies, but we'll move up and down the cap spectrum depending on where the valuations are fairest or the trends are most appealing. But you can see this S&P 500 over time, going back to 1926, has been 10%. Small stacks, 11%. That has been true overseas as well, going back to 1970, which is when they started tracking the returns. The EFI's been up 11, and small stocks have been up 16. So those trends tend to be persistent over time. Why not hold a smaller cap bias, which we do? Now, there are lots of stocks on the planet. In the US, there are about 5,000 investable securities. That number's actually been dropping. But while our number has been dropping due to regulations, the non-US American amount of stocks has actually been increasing. The Europe, Middle East, and Asia number of stocks has been increasing, and Asia has been going gangbusters. And so today there are about 45,000 stocks on the planet to choose from. We need a little help. So what we do is, again, going back to our core of being transparent, liquid, and regulated, we rely on mutual fund managers and occasionally an ETF to execute our portfolio. We allocate 11.25% slices to the core positions on both the value side and the growth side, and then we reserve that 10% slice. We'll have one manager, two managers in there, depending on what we think will be effective. So that is the framework. Now, here's the big debate. And some of you like this debate, some of you maybe haven't heard this debate before, but it's one that we need to revisit frequently. And that's, okay, if we're going to buy funds, do we just buy index funds or do we buy active funds? Well, if you look at the data, most active funds underperform the index. In fact, only about 40% of active mutual funds actually outperform their representative indexes. So therefore, we should just own index funds. Let's dig a little deeper. Well, most active funds are actually not all that active. So most active funds end up just being closet index funds. And you can see in blue, the amount of stock pickers going back to 1980 is actually diminished from 60% of the mutual fund marketplace down to 20% of the mutual fund marketplace. Why? Because if you're running a mutual fund and you get flooded with cash, your incentive is just to kind of cover your arse, right? And so you want to kind of hug the index, not make anybody too mad. But unfortunately, when you do that with your operating expense ratio, you tend to lag. So if you actually look at the rates of returns relative to the benchmarks net, those mutual fund managers who are actually stock pickers, and we can find them, and we look for them, and we do, end up outperforming the benchmark. The other mutual fund managers that are not active, that are not stock pickers, are closet indexers, and they're not worth paying for.